Hi, everybody. I'm Thomas Burkhardt with NASA Spaceflight here at Astra's headquarters, and I'm here talking to CEO Chris Kemp. Chris, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming on to NASA Spaceflight Live. That was an absolute pleasure. Some stuff has happened since, and we're getting ready for the launch of Rocket 3.3. What are your expectations for this upcoming launch?
Well, we hope to learn a lot. This will be a test flight of our improved Rocket 3. We'll be taking a test payload from the Space Force, and hopefully we'll have a full flight, so we'll be able to collect a full set of data for them.
And how confident are you in the success of Rocket 3.3?
Well, I think we'll learn a lot, and I certainly hope we get a full flight in. A lot of changes have been made, and we've incorporated all of the data from a complete flight back in December into this new version. And regardless of what the outcome of the flight is, we'll take whatever we learn, we'll make whatever changes, and we'll fly again.
What shift in the industry at large is the most important to you, and what is Astra's role in that?
Well, I think the ability to quickly iterate. We're seeing both Astra and other companies quickly make another version, learn as much as they can, and then iterate. And it's really particularly easy to do with such a small launch vehicle.
So you mentioned launch sites. What kind of places are acceptable for Astra's rockets to launch? Are you limited to the places we traditionally think of, normal launch ranges, or is there infrastructure or regulatory infrastructure in place to launch from pretty much anywhere?
Well, we can basically launch anywhere we have a license, which means we just need to find a place where we're far enough away from population centers to not bother people. And we're investigating over a dozen different locations, both domestically and abroad. Our system could be completely shipped and unpacked, and we can launch a rocket within a few days. So you can kind of see how that enables us to be very flexible. And we're going to continue to be able to develop and iterate on the entire launch system, including the spaceport, at that same rate.
So just on Thursday, I believe Astra received their authorization to operate out of Kodiak, Alaska through 2026. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. We received a launch operator's license from the FAA, and that allows us to launch this version of the vehicle through 2026. It means we don't have to go through a licensing process for every single launch. But as long as we're launching out of the trajectories with the current spaceport, the current rocket.
What kind of forward work is needed to start launching these rockets from more non-traditional locations, things that are not already established spaceports?
Really, from our perspective, it's just a licensing issue. So we just need a fence and a concrete pad, and we bring our infrastructure in and we launch. So very little actual work needs to go into setting up the site. A lot of work needs to go into make sure that we're not going to interfere with the community and we're not going to cause any disruption. So we try to find places that are away from cities and population centers, typically in coastal areas.
So on NASA Spaceflight Live, you mentioned a point-to-point cargo delivery system as part of the future of Astra. But I believe Astra is looking externally for the re-entry part of that. Can you talk a little bit about that decision?
Well, I think that Astra's focus right now is in mass producing and scaling launch operations. That focus means that we're not off building larger rockets. We're not going to try to put people on our rockets. We're not going to try to work on re-entry systems. And so it's a natural area where we can get something to space. We're going to partner to try to figure out how we get it back to the Earth safely.
You know, some other companies have made that same promise of saying, listen, we're in the small sat launch business. We're never going to go to bigger rockets. Some other companies have ended up changing their mind. How set are you on that? Is that something you're completely off the table or open to potentially, if the market calls for it, Astra's serving into that market as well?
Well, we've already sold over 50 launches, and we're very focused on what our customers ask us for. And right now, there is an overwhelming demand for point-to-point launch services. And what that means for us is we can't scale fast enough, and we can't focus more attention on continuing to drive the cost down and the scale up of the launch services that we provide today.
What do you believe is the sweet spot capability for a small sat launch vehicle as far as size is concerned?
Well, for Astra, it was the smallest rocket that would meet the needs of today's market today. And that's the 50 kilogram class Rocket 3 series. As we start to see more large mega constellations come online, that sweet spot moves to around 150 to 200 kilograms, where we ultimately seeing it settle out from an economic perspective is a small rocket that can deliver approximately 500 kilograms to a mid-inclination orbit.
Do you think that you'll fly a lot of missions that are basically a three-stage vehicle similar to Rocket Lab's Electron once you have that spacecraft bus coming online?
Yeah, we think that having more ability to add capacity to the upper stage gives us a lot more flexibility. So the Apollo Fusion engine is a great example of a technology that lets us have more precision and more capacity.
And so these design changes and or designs that you're looking towards and the evolutions that you're aiming towards, how does that market and how does that compare to your competitors that are also in the small sat market, which is growing seemingly by the day?
Right. Well, what we're trying to do is focus on flight rate above all else. So if we can fly, for example, next week, we'll take what we learn. So that next rocket will benefit from whatever we learn.
On launch day for this upcoming rocket, how is that going to look different from the previous launch as far as personnel involved, the countdown process as far as automation is concerned?
We're really very similar to the previous launch. We have about a half a dozen people up in Alaska. We have about a half a dozen people in a launch control room here, and we're going to be running the launch using a lot of the same software and systems that we used in December.
So what is the objective of this upcoming launch with regards to Astra serving the Space Force in the future?
Well, this will be the first launch of an orbital launch system. So it'll be a test launch being performed for the Space Test Program within the Space Force. What we'll be doing is we'll be launching to a very specific orbit and inclination. We'll be watching that closely. We have a test payload that's been instrumented. So we're going to be looking at the vibrational environments, the acoustic environments, the thermal environments, so that we can give all that data to the Space Force. So this payload will not be deployed from the spacecraft, but we're going to measure our ability to get it exactly where it needs to go.